Welcome back. Andrew, we were talking earlier about contentment and patience. I'm thinking that there were times in the Old Testament that the people really needed those.
Yeah, that's true, absolutely. One that has some parallels to what we're experiencing here in 2020 with the COVID crisis comes from Jeremiah 29. Do you mind setting the stage for us?
Not at all. The people of Israel were unfaithful to the Lord their God, and our God. After many warnings from prophets over hundreds of years, the Lord allowed the Babylonians under King Nebuchadnezzar to enter the promised land and to take the people captive. Many of them were carried off into exile and had to live in Babylon. This letter was sent from Jeremiah the prophet to the exiles in Babylon. It's a letter from the Lord through the prophet. Why don't we read it together? Andrew, would you start?
Absolutely. Jeremiah 29, 4-14. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Okay, whoa. Can we just pause here for a moment? What do you make of that first part where God says he carried the exiles from Jerusalem to Babylon?
Yeah, the exiles I carried, yeah. Clearly God is saying that people shouldn't blame the Babylonians. They are in exile because they turned their backs on God. This banishment was his doing, but it's their responsibility. They turned away and spiritually distanced themselves from God, so he sent them away and physically distanced them from Jerusalem, which represented his presence among them. Proverbs says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. When we are defiant and rebellious, we make ourselves enemies of God. I'd rather have him on my side, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. The letter from the Lord sent by Jeremiah continues. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there. Do not decrease. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper.
Yes, this is what the Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. They are prophesying lies to you in my name. I have not sent them, declares the Lord.
This is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my good promise to bring you back to this place. Randy, that isn't what the people of Israel wanted to hear. That wasn't the answer to their prayers that they were hoping for, was it?
Not even close. People were stuck in a situation and location that wasn't their preference or choosing. There were restrictions on where they could go and what they could do. They didn't have freedom of movement, and certainly larger gatherings would have been prohibited lest they lead to uprisings or revolts.
That does sound a little bit like some of what we're going through. So they were hoping for a really fast exodus from living in a place they didn't want to be, and to be liberated from restrictions to their movements and activities in the near future.
That's right. They were desperate to hear things were going to go back to normal soon. They wanted God to tell them they could go back to their normal places, to their normal activities, to go back to Jerusalem and worship at the temple together again. But God said, settle in, it's going to be a while.
And not just a short while. God was talking about generations. Marry off your children. Enjoy your grandchildren, because it will be 70 years before things go back to normal. That means basically all of the adults would have died off, and most of the children too. Are you suggesting we're going to be stuck with some new normal here with COVID for 70 years?
I sure hope not, Andrew. But none of us really knows what the future holds. I think the normal for the next month is going to be replaced by some new normal over the summer months. And then we'll see what becomes the norm in the fall. I'm pretty sure it won't be what we used to know. They're saying no stadium events, sports, concerts, or shows for a year or more until there's a cure or vaccine. So what will normal be?
Maybe that's hard to hear, but I think you're right. So how does this connect to contentment and patience?
God was telling his people they needed to accept the way things were and make the best of them. If their expectations were different, they would be frustrated. They weren't going to be able to go back to what was familiar, to what was normal, or what they used to take for granted. Right there in the new place with new rules and uncomfortable legislations and regulations, they needed to find a way to create a new normal and to just embrace that.
So God wanted them to be content where they were and how they were, even though they really didn't like their circumstances at all.
That's right. If their expectations continued to be that things would go back to normal, if they were waiting day by day for that to happen, they would become increasingly frustrated and impatient. If they took to heart the message of God from Jeremiah and accepted that they couldn't change things, accepted the things that God said wouldn't change, they could find peace of mind and heart, contentment with their circumstances, and a good life even though it was different from what they used to know.
I really love the next verse. It's a favorite for many people. Verse 11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future." That's what we want to hear. What we all want to know and hold on to. That God has plans for us. Good plans. Plans for a positive future filled with hope and not harm.
And that's true. God has good plans for everyone. If we follow Him and accept what He provides, we too can find contentment in the places He allows us to end up. I'm thinking again about Joseph, who we've mentioned before. What was his attitude when he was in prison and forgotten there by the cupbearer who promised to get him out?
Well, Joseph kept a good attitude. He continued to serve the Lord faithfully and do what was right. Eventually, God brought him out of the prison, but even while he was in prison, he was able to be content, satisfied with where he was and how he was, knowing God was with him and was looking out for him.
I remember this true story of a preacher who was in prison, I believe it was in Nepal, because he'd been sharing his faith. So while he was in prison, he shared his food and his faith with and helped other prisoners. And many of them placed their faith and trust in Jesus. And he would share with the guards and talk to them too, and several of them put their faith and trust in Jesus. Eventually they decided this preacher, after being in and out of solitary confinement for a while, he was just too dangerous to be in prison because he kept leading people to put their faith in Jesus. So they kicked him out of the prison.
That's an incredible story. He was more than content. He saw his imprisonment as an opportunity to live out his faith. And he made a huge difference by living to please God in impossible circumstances. Lord, help us to honor you even when we aren't happy with our circumstances. Help us to embrace every day with contentment and seize every opportunity as a day to live for you and bring glory to you through our attitudes, our approach to life, and our patient endurance of trials and troubles.
Jeremiah continues. Verse 12 says, "Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and bring you back from captivity."
Randy, it seems to me that the Lord is saying he won't even listen to their prayers until the 70 years is up. Is that right?
Partially. The one prayer he won't listen to until the 70 years are over, is the prayer to bring them back to Jerusalem, to free them from captivity, because God said the exile is going to last 70 years. Any other prayer he would listen to. That's kind of what John gets at when he says, this is the confidence we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. That's from 1 John 5:14.
So because this went directly against God's expressed will, they might as well save their breath and stop asking for it.
Yes. But the great news is God also says, you'll seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. In Jeremiah 30:21, God asks a question. He asks, who is he or she who will devote himself or herself to be close to me? Who will devote themselves to be close to me? Great question, eh?
Yeah, that is a great question and a very important question. Folks, in this time when many of our normal life activities have been stripped away, will you devote yourself to draw close to God? Will you seek him with all your heart? Will you give him more of your time and your attention? Will you give more of that to your relationship with Jesus and press in to know him more?
The Lord says, you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. I will be found by you. Lord, forgive us for seeking so many other things and not seeking first your kingdom, your righteousness, and you. Help us to change faulty expectations, to choose contentment, to embrace the situations and circumstances we can't change or control, and help us to live to please you every day in every way.
Amen. Well, that's all for today, folks. If you have questions or comments, you can find our contact information at rosevilleub.ca. That's rosevilleub.ca. There are a couple more worship songs on the playlist, and if you look closely, you'll see some animals hiding in the background.
Moo.
See how many you can pick out and send us a note. Have a great day.
Blessings.